basketball season, as we've just completed week 21 of the season, and it is now time for the fantasy basketball playoffs. So, as a quick little recap for you, let's take a peek at what my fantasy basketball lineup consisted of in this year's season. This is the first time I've done a sleeper basketball league, and I made a video about it not too long ago, and now we're just following up to see how things panned out. So, this season, my lineup consisted of Cade Cunningham, point guard of the Detroit Pistons, Jamal Murray, point guard of the Denver Nuggets, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, point guard for the Oklahoma City Thunder, Josh Giddey, shooting guard for the Chicago Bulls, Miles Bridges, small forward for the Charlotte Hornets, Pascal Siakam, power forward for the Indiana Pacers, Jarrett Allen, center for the Cleveland Cavaliers, Kristaps Porzingis, center for the Boston Celtics, Chris Paul, point guard for the San Antonio Spurs, Keontae George, point guard for the Utah Jazz, Franz Wagner, small forward for the Orlando Magic, and finally, I had on my injured reserve Anthony Davis, power forward for the Dallas Mavericks, at one point the LA Lakers. So, now that you know my roster, let us take a look at the final standings and the playoff picture. So, this was a 10-team sleeper lock-in league. And of the 10 teams, there were 6 that got to advance into the playoff picture. So I'll be going through just a brief statistical recap of all 6 teams that made the playoffs. So, in first place in our final standings, we have my team. I went 18-3 in the 21 weeks of this fantasy basketball season, and if we adjust that to an 82-game pace like an NBA team, that would be roughly a 70-12 season. So I did decently well. Overall, I scored 8,589.5 points for, which amounts to an average of 409 points per week, and I had 8 transactions total over the course of the season. So, with that, we can move into our second place finisher, and this is Team SK. Team SK went 15-6 in the regular season, which would amount to a 59-23 pace for an NBA team. He scored 8,270 points for over the course of the season, which is roughly 394 points per week, and Team SK had 20 transactions this season. Moving into our third place finisher, we have Team Ash. Team Ash also finished at a 15-6 record in the regular season, which would be 59-23 as well. But the reason why Team Ash fell below Team SK in the final standings was because they only scored 7,765.8 points for, amounting to 370 points per week. That is roughly 500 points less in total over the course of the season, and 24 points less per week than Team SK. And finally, Team Ash had 33 transactions this league year. So, with that, we can move into matchups and the weeks. So Short Toucan falls two wins behind Team Ash. And Team Short Toucan was the most active of any team in the league this year with 59 transactions, which is more than 2 transactions a week. Next up, our penultimate finisher coming in at 5th place. We have Team Adele 616, who had an 11-10 record this season, which adjusts to a 43-39 pace for the NBA. They finished with 7,587.7 points or roughly 361 points per week, and they finished with 11 transactions. And finally, we have our final playoff seed, the 6th seed in this year's playoff bracket. This is going to be Team Ianen. Team Ianen finished with a 10-11 record, not even above 500. That would adjust to a 39-43 record in the NBA. They scored 6,893.8 points for this season, or roughly 328 points per week, and they finished with 24 transactions on the year. So, now that you have been filled in on the final standings heading into the playoffs, I'm going to give a couple self-awarded awards to my team just to give you a recap of how I did this season. So the first award is going to be the Built by the Draft award. Of all the teams in the league, I had the fewest number of transactions in total. I had 8 transactions this year, one of those being a trade. So over the course of 21 weeks, I only actually made 7 lineup swaps or drops. And so, part of that, I think it's 2 main things. Or also, I wanted to mention, even with the fewest transactions, I did end up with the most points for of any team. And I think there's 2 reasons why that happened. Number 1, great drafting. I think that in the draft, I just had the best one. Not to pat my own back, even though that's definitely what I am doing. Yeah, I think the drafting, the way that I utilized the budget was a little bit more money savvy than some of these other teams. Number 2, I think in my control, it was the consistency. I think just logging on every day to make sure the right players are in the starting lineup. So the consistency and thoroughness throughout the entire season. And that's one thing that I feel like is different about this league compared to all the fantasy football leagues that I was doing with you guys. Those subscriber leagues, people were very active on the waiver wires. People were, I guess, more in tune with what was going on, and they were attentive. Some of the teams in this league, they just do not bother, and this is people that I know in real life, so it's kind of more embarrassing. I don't actually know these people in particular. I know one guy, 2 guys in this 10-person league who I've played pickup with, and they invited me to be part of this league. So I don't know any of the other guys in the playoffs. The guys that I know, they've already been eliminated, but some people, like we had a guy go 1-20 in this league. I don't think he ever checked his lineup. Some other people just weren't as good, weren't as lucky. But overall, I think just consistency and a good draft allowed me to have such few transactions, but end up with the most successful team. And I think the third element, which was out of my control, was just luck. I didn't have major injury problems on my roster, but I will say my second award that I'm going to grant myself is the Weathered the Storm award of the people on my roster. I did face 2 semi-significant injuries, no season-ending ones, but my second best player that I had on my my team, Anthony Davis, was actually my best player for an early stretch. He has been out for the last 5 weeks straight with, I don't remember if I think it's a groin injury or an ab injury. And so in those 5 weeks, I've managed to stay at a 4-1 record and, still compete even without AD. So that has been nice. And then the other major injury that my team endured this year was Franz Wagner. He was out for 6 weeks in the middle of the season, and I was luckily able to still go 6-0 in the stretch that he sat out. I'd say in my overall team, Shea, then AD, then Cade, and Franz Wagner was probably the 4th best player. So I had 2 people in my top 5 get injured at different points of the season, but it didn't really hurt or affect my team all too much. I think Kristaps Porzingis was in and out of injury for like the entire season as well, but he wasn't someone that I heavily relied on, so it was fine. And the third award that I will be awarded is the Top Performer Award. There is a screenshot of all the best performances from this year's season that I can pull up. I should have had it. This is a slip up on my end. Nope, I don't have it on my laptop. Okay, 1 second. Let me pull it up on my phone because I have a photo. I guess I just forgot to send it to myself on Discord. Here we see the top weekly scores, all-time weekly high scores from this season. There are 10 entries. Number 1 goes to Team SK, and he finished with 478 points in week 20. Number 2 is Team SK with 462.9 points in week 16. Then we have me in week 4 with 455 points. Then me in week 4 with 451.9 points. In week 5 we have Team SK with 449 points in week 6. At number 6 we have in week 10 442.9 points from SK. So it's just me and SK on this list now. Then we have in week 7 me, not week 7, at number 7. In week 18 I scored 440.5 points. At number 8 I scored 436 points in week 20. At number 9 I scored 436 points in week 14. And finally at number 10 we have the only other person besides me and SK, Team Ianen, who scored 433 points in week 6. So, of the top 10 performances across the league this year, I held 5, SK held 4, and Team Ianen held 1. But the actual top 2 best performances do go to SK. So, props to Team SK. So, and yeah, now that you have an idea of the regular season, I'm going to do a little bit of a brief recap on my history versus the rest of the playoff field. So, versus the number 2 finisher on the season, Team SK. This season, I went 1-1 against them. The first matchup, I won by 223 points, which is a lot. It's a magnificent margin. That's the biggest margin I won by over anyone this year. I think I was at like roughly 450, and he was at roughly 225. And the reason why it's so big is because his team early on just was like riddled with injuries, so it's not that his team is actually that bad. It was just a time and place kind of thing. That was his worst week in the entire season. But yeah, and then the other time I went up against him, I lost by 23 points, which I think was my worst loss of the season. So, won by 223, lost by 23. I'm 1-1 against SK this season. against the third place finisher, Team Ash, I went 2-0. In our first matchup, I won by 8 points. In our second matchup, I won by 11 points. Next up, against team number 4, Team Short Toucan, the fourth place finisher, I went 2-0 as well. I won by 17 points in our first matchup, and I won by 52 points in our second matchup. Then, against the fifth place finisher, Team Adele, I went 3-0 this season, winning by 32 in our first matchup, 65 in our second matchup, and by 38 in our third matchup. And finally, against the sixth place finisher, Team Ianon, I went 2-1. I lost our first matchup in week 2 by 6 points, which I'm very salty about. Then in our next matchup, I won by 55 points. And finally, in our third matchup, I won by 207 points. So I was able to eventually get the last laugh, but yeah, I definitely wish I could have that week 2 matchup back, because it was just earlier on. I slipped up. I definitely had enough points to win it. I didn't execute, so that's on me. Could have finished even better than this, but I'll have to take it on the chin and just move on. So, based on everything that you've seen, everything that I've explained, you can probably tell that this is a very top-heavy league. I hope I don't jinx myself, but I don't really see teams 4, 5, and 6 being a threat in this playoff bracket. The way this playoff bracket is lined up with the 6 finishers is me and Team SK are going to get a first round bye, and we're going to have Team Ash face off with Team Ianon, the 3 seed versus the 6 seed, and then we're going to have Team Short Toucan face off against Adele 616, so the 4th seed versus the 5th seed. Whoever wins between Ash and Ianon will face me in the second round of the playoffs, and whoever wins between Short Toucan and Adele 616 will face Team SK in round 2, and then the championship will be whichever teams are left after week 2 of the playoffs. So, yeah, just my my personal belief based on how these games have played out, based on the rosters. I really think it is between my team, Team SK, and Team Ash. Team Ash, I have managed to win both of our matchups, but only by slim margins. So I do think it could be anyone. And I think Team SK, other than my team, it does have the best team put together. I think SK is the real biggest threat, and you've seen that in any given week they can really pop off. They have the 2 best single week totals out of anyone in this league. So definitely a real major threat. I think either of those 2 teams could take me out. Team SK I can't face up against until the finals, and in Team Ash I could see it in round 2 itself. So that would be a good bar. Like a good barometer to see if I'm ready. If I fall apart, I will be extremely disappointed in myself. I do think that like 400 points minimum is the goal. And I'll just have to be savvy about it. I do have finals coming up this week, so I'll try my best to stay on top of it. If I do end up slipping up, it is what it is, but I am sincerely hoping that I can take it all in this league. And so, real quick, just so that you have an idea of what the competition is, let me go through the opponents' lineups so you can see what kind of, rosters I'll be dealing with. So, the second place finisher, Team SK, this is his lineup. And not in a particular order, this is just based on his most recent play. So he has point guard of the Denver Nuggets, Christian Brown. Point guard for the Milwaukee Bucks, Damian Lillard. Small forward for the Toronto Raptors, RJ Barrett. Shooting guard for the Phoenix Suns, Devin Booker. Small forward for the Toronto Raptors, Scotty Barnes. Houston Rockets, Jabari Smith. And then on his injured reserve, he has center for the Portland Trail Blazers, DeAndre Ayton, and point guard for the Houston Rockets, Eamon Thompson. Jokic is his powerhouse, as you can tell. He does have a good roster. I think that RJ all around has been pretty solid this season. Dame puts up points, Devin Booker puts up points, Scotty all around is great. Walker Kessler can have a nice game here and there. Mobley's having a career year, but Jokic is definitely like the engine on his team, and he's just been on a tear. So it makes sense that I have Shea and he has Jokic, and we're the two best teams. So yeah. Then taking a look at Team Ash's number 3 finishing roster, we have shooting guard of the San Antonio Spurs, Devin Vassell. Shooting guard for the LA Lakers, Austin Reeves. Point guard for the Cleveland Cavaliers, Darius Garland. Small forward for the LA Clippers, Kawhi Leonard. Center for the Detroit Pistons, Jalen Duren. Shooting guard for the Memphis Grizzlies, Desmond Bane. Center for the Los Angeles Clippers, Afika Zubac. Shooting guard for the New Orleans Pelicans, CJ McCollum. Point guard for the San Antonio Spurs, Stephon Castle. Then on his bench, point guard for the Washington Wizards, Keyshawn George. Power forward for the Minnesota Timberwolves, Jaden McDaniels. And power forward for the Dallas Mavericks, PJ Washington. And on his bench, on his injured reserve, he has shooting guard for the LA Clippers, Norman Powell, and point guard for the New York Knicks, Jalen Brunson. So his best players, I would venture, are Jalen Brunson, Darius Garland, and Austin Reeves, probably. I don't think that Kawhi has been as productive this season. I mean, I haven't really been paying attention, but he was also out for such a long stretch that I can't imagine that's what's keeping his team up. Oh, Norman Powell. Norman Powell was an all-star, so yeah, that makes sense. But I will say, a weaker roster than the first two. Anyway, after that we have Team Short Toucan. This is the 4th place finisher, and he has point guard of the Atlanta Hawks, Trae Young. Small forward of the New York Knicks, Mikal Bridges. Point guard of the Chicago Bulls, Trey Jones. Shooting guard of the Dallas Mavericks, Spencer Dinwiddie. Small forward of the Portland Trailblazers, Denny Afdija. Power forward from the Orlando Magic, Paolo Banchero. Power forward from the Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Point guard for the Dallas Mavericks, Brandon Williams. Center for the Chicago Bulls, Nikola Vucevic. Point guard for the Portland Trailblazers, Shaedon Sharpe. Power forward for the Chicago Bulls, Zach Collins. And center for the 76ers, Andre Drummond. So, Giannis, Paolo, Trey. I had given him Jimmy Butler at some point. I guess he traded him away. But yeah, his team has some solid players. Anyway, after that, we have our 5th place finisher, Team Adele 616, and he has point guard of the Lakers, Luka Doncic. Shooting guard for the Miami Heat, Tyler Hero. Shooting guard for the Boston Celtics, Derek White. Shooting guard for the Sacramento Kings, Malik Monk. Small forward for the Boston Celtics, Jason Tatum. Power forward for the Houston Rockets, Tari Eason. Center for the Miami Heat, Bam Adebayo. Shooting guard for the Washington Wizards, Jordan Poole. Center for the Sacramento Kings, Jonas Valanciunas. Shooting guard for the Philadelphia 76ers, Tyrese Maxey. Small forward for the Cleveland Cavaliers, DeAndre Hunter. Power forward for the Memphis Grizzlies, Brandon Clark. And on his injured reserve, he has Bilal Coulibaly of the Washington Wizards and Jaden Ivey. season, I feel like this roster is a little bit better than where it is. You just must not be paying as much attention, because you've got Luka, you've got Tyler Hero, you've got Derek White, you've got Jason Tatum, you've got Bam Adebayo, Jordan Poole has had a solid year. I guess Tyrese Maxey has been injured, but even then, this team has way more talent than the number of wins it has. And finally, we have Team Iannan's 6th place finishing team with point guard of the Rockets, Fred VanVleet, shooting guard of the Clippers, James Harden, point guard of the 76ers, Jeff Doughton, small forward for the Knicks, OG Anunoby, small forward of the Denver Nuggets, Michael Porter, center for the Knicks, Karl Anthony Towns, center for the Hawks, Onyeka Okongwu, power forward for the Utah Jazz, Lauri Markkanen, power forward for the Milwaukee Bucks, Kyle Kuzma, shooting guard for the Phoenix Suns, Bradley Beal, shooting guard for the Cleveland Cavaliers, Donovan Mitchell, point guard for the Thunder, Cason Wallace, and on his injured reserve he has power forward for the Sacramento Kings, Domantas Sabonis, and center for the New Orleans Pelicans, Yves Missy. Even his roster is a little bit better. I guess people just aren't good at locking in, maybe. But James Harden, OG, Michael Porter, Cat, Lauri, Donovan Mitchell, Sabonis, like, that's a good squad. I don't know. I haven't been paying attention to each person's individual seasons, but yeah, maybe these teams are a little bit better than I'm giving them credit for. It might just be user error. The teams aren't that bad, but the playoffs should be fun, and they'll start officially tomorrow. Technically, we're wrapping up week 21 today, but it's already evident who is going to win and who is not, and I thought I would do a quick video on it. Once again, I do have finals this week, so the videos might be shorter, and I'll be going on spring break next week, and that means I'll be doing a lot of travel. So I will say, over the next 2 weeks, there might be a dip in the content. The videos, if they do come out, they'll probably be shorter. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you enjoy content like this, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll be putting out more videos as the weeks progress. And yeah, thanks for watching. I will see you